Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Ken.
Nice to see everybody tonight.
Good evening, all.
Good to know that we've all made another Sabbath.
Good evening.
And tonight we're going to discuss a little bit of news, a little bit about the oil situation right now. It's cheap, and I'm sure everybody's enjoying that while it lasts. So we're going to discuss that and how it could affect world affairs and how it could kind of play out possibly in prophecy. So if you want to start us out.
Oh, Ken, would you mention some websites people can use to get, because you get lollipop news off the major TV networks, where people can get a little more news in the world?
Well, I use I use the Drudge sometimes to get populated news because it's just articles from all over the web, and a lot of them affect world affairs and that. But when I want to find something out, I try to avoid some of the offbeat stuff because a lot of that's just personal opinion. I like to go to Pravda or Deutsche Welle or the German site. So if you want to go to a country and learn about what they're doing and what their media is putting out, because most of their media is probably propaganda as well that supports their government's views. I go straight to the sources. I go to their to those countries' websites. You look for newspapers from that location, and I'll look up. There's some that populate all the newspapers from all over the world, and I'll bring that up here in a bit, and I'll share that a bit later. But it's good to go straight to the news from the country that you want to investigate or get what's going on and what their people think and their opinions are. Go straight to it. Almost every one of them has an English version. I think even North Korea has their own propaganda news English version. But a lot of people on the web, they just go to 2 or 3 sites or whatever they do, but they don't branch out. And there is unlimited sources. Most of it probably no good. But if you go to the country sources, especially when things are happening, it's a good way to go. So that's what I do.
Good. Well, let me, before we get to world affairs, let's start off with 3 corny regular church jokes. And these are from Carolyn and Bill Birch. I want to thank them for the jokes. And they're good supporters of this program. Yes. There is a story of a pastor who got up on one Sunday and announced to his congregation, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is we have enough money to pay for our new building. The bad news, it's still out there in your pockets." And this this one is it's similar to that one, but I still want to read it because I think it's a good joke, very similar. The minister was preoccupied with thoughts of how he was going to ask the congregation to come up with more money than they were expecting because they had some big repairs for the building and they needed, last-minute flush of cash. And he says, and he told the organist who wanted the job, "I'm thinking of something to play after the announcement about finances, so you think about it." During the service, the minister paused and said, "Brothers and sisters, we're in great difficulty. The roof needs repair, twice as much as expected. We need another $4,000 and some plumbing problems. Any of you who can pledge $100 or more, stand up." At that moment, the substitute organist played Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, that I like.
And he got the job. Speaking of world news, here's something we saw in the newspaper that I believe very few people are aware of. They verify at least 100, but they know there are more. People have starved recently in eastern Ukraine. Why did they starve? Some of this seems unbelievable, but uh, various governments over there are cutting off their government pensions, because they're not supporting, I assume, the Russian separatists or whoever they're not supporting, and with no money, they're starving. And this is Ukraine, where the Russians use that tactic to force the kulaks off the land for Stalin's great new state farms, which failed, by the way, big failure. At least 2 million to 7 million Ukrainians starved, and that's happening again because of Russian meddling in the affairs of Ukraine. They've actually, they call it freezing in place the fighting, but what it means is at least the Russian supporters have control of eastern Ukraine now. Now, how it will all flush out in the long run, but the Ukraine has been divided. In the world, I mean, there doesn't seem to be much, hardly even notice of it.
No, no, I haven't heard about it till you mentioned it.
And that in Crimea are the first border changes since World War II set the map in order. So things are changing. Just one more thing that might mention, the Russian ruble, crashed a few weeks ago, and now the oil prices are down far below where Russia can produce, because they're not efficient in production of oil like some American companies are. They're very inefficient. So this is an absolute financial disaster to the Russians. So the question I want to ask you all is, what will Putin do?
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I was at their site, or the Russian, or the what was it? Oh, and
Bob?
yeah, they were talking that it sounds like they're going to politicize they're putting their own twist on it, that it's not what we're saying it is, this ruble war. In fact, but then again, I was reading another article that they were saying that people over there are buying everything they need or think they might need in the near future. Cars, electronics, appliances, because they're jumping in price. Guy bought a refrigerator or something a week or so ago, and it's jumped up to, it's 25%. It's increased by 25%. The price has. So Putin he's got to do something fairly soon to stave this collapse or partial collapse of the ruble. But exactly how he's going to handle it, I do not know. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know how he's going to fix this. This is going to be interesting.
Knowing this gas thing may very well finish him off, because
You
I
know,
think there's external pressures trying to remove him from office.
yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that they're pushing him out for someone that'll play ball a little better with him.
And it could work out that way. Although it's like cornering a bully.
Yeah.
You need to worry about him the most. Well, I don't know for absolute fact, and this be difficult to. If I make the comparison to World War II, the comparison is doesn't fully fit, but I'll make it anyway. Though it admittedly does not fit in many respects. Admit that. When the U.S. cut off oil supplies to Japan, and whatever that was, 37, 38, because of their invasion of China, and then they cut off steel and some other stuff, froze assets. But the Japanese still had a big, powerful military. And, I mean, obviously Japan could have left America alone, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they had to do it. But can you see how historians say, I mean, they could have gone around the Philippines, they could have done other things. But can you see how, if you're aggressive and you have a big military and you're whatever, the last thing you and of course the Japanese could have argued also that America was not purely neutral. Roosevelt definitely did not want them to invade China and supported Chiang Kai-shek indirectly. But the point is, when they got in financial trouble, they got more belligerent.
Right. More desperate. And right now, with the oil being dropping like it has, and him having trouble with the ruble, it just may make him more desperate. They've got, if you read their newspapers over there, if you read some of the articles in them, they're kind of they're in a almost a war mentality or a Cold War mentality right now. I mean, they're taking this real serious. One of the articles on Pravda is the myth of currency wars in Russia, and it goes on to explain what, from their point of view, what's going on with the currency. And it'd be interesting if people want to go there, and check it out later, because it's interesting to get the perspective of the other countries. All we hear and all we see is what we get fed. And when you see it from their perspective, you know what their mental setting is going into these situations.
Their ties with China may also be a little closer ties than what we even realize, because if y'all remember back, I think it was earlier in the spring or the first of this year, maybe summer anyway. It hasn't been that long ago since Russia and China got together and removed the dollar as their standard of trade between the two. They are now exchanging Russian money for Chinese money, or for the oil products and other things that they exchange. And that was hit the headline pretty hard, because we used to make money off of everybody in the world's transactions. Everybody used to have to change things to the dollar, and I think if I remember the article correctly, they were bringing Iran along with them to try to offset the punishments that embargoes that we had against Iran. And I think China's trying to make themselves more and more dominant, and Russia may wind up leaning on them more than we could realize.
You all realize that China has replaced America a month ago as the world's biggest economy.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people don't know that because the news doesn't push that up much at all. It's these low oil prices, if they get too low, they endanger the oil industry and may actually destabilize the world. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying it is not out of the possibility that it could happen. I mean, right now it's a good thing for America, but it's not a good thing for everybody. And it's almost as if these oil prices, it's like a way to push at the king of the north. In this case, it's Russia. But it's something to watch to see the effect on it and see how it's going to work out. And as we discuss this, I think the first part of discussing oil and Bible prophecy is the immutable law of supply and demand. This fall, oil production rose, and I didn't actually, it's either went to 93 billion barrels a day or something like that, and supply was only 92. I mean, demand was only 92. That was the beginning. Normally, when something like that happens, and it happened because Europe's in a recession and China's exploding growth has slowed down. Their economy slowed down. So world demand slowed down. Also, more efficient cars, more and more in the developed world are coming online, and other machines. All those things have lowered the demand, while U.S. shale, fracking and other things, U.S. shale production and Canadian tar sands oil production have increased enormously. So you have the supply and demand. Well, what did the Saudi princes do? November 4th, I think that was the key date. Everything in the energy sector on the big financial boards went red because of falling oil prices. So what did the Saudi princes do? Normally, what the other OPEC, a lot of the poorer OPEC members said, well, let's cut back our production and try to drive the price back up, price support. The Saudis did the opposite. They dumped oil, especially to America, sold oil cheaper, and upped their production to squeeze the profit margins on U.S. shale oil producers and eliminate that competition in the future. So the question is, will it work?
Well, I would think if they keep it up long enough, yeah, they'll stop. I mean, you're not going to lose money, so they're going to stop pulling the shale out, or they'll stop doing it. You mentioned some things that have lowered our use of oil. Another big one is young people are not driving. If you look it up, young people, teenagers, are not getting their driver's license as soon as they used to. I mean, when we were kids, we couldn't get our driver's license and get up out of the house soon enough. But nowadays, they're not doing that. That was because where I work, we have meetings every week, and we discuss this sort of stuff. And that's one of the big factors is, number one, the cars that were all destroyed during that, what was that, cash for clunkers thing. It got a lot of big V8s off the roads, and the younger people are not driving. They're not getting their license as soon as they used to. All those factors have reduced our use of oil in this country a tremendous amount. Plus, like you said, the more efficient vehicles that are out there now. But that's adding a lot to it, to reduce what we consume.
It's like in the short run, the OPEC could raise prices and everyone suffers. But in the long run, higher oil does reward efficiency. And so that worked against them. And it's starting to show itself.
Right.
And according to one article I read, these are all investor people who think they know. The Saudis don't admit this. But they say what really bothers the Saudis, really frustrates them, is they're losing control over global oil pricing. For many decades, kings would, sort of go on bended knees to the Saudis and say, "Oh, please, pump a little more oil, lower oil prices. Let's kill our economy." And the Saudis, thumb up or thumb down. They could affect oil prices because they let OPEC and some of the other wealthy states in the Persian Gulf that go with them. That group could pretty much control world oil prices. Well, that's a lot of power, as well as money, of course, and the wealth that goes with it. And the Saudis, they have a lot of money saved up, so they're not hurting for money. But I think it's the power that they lost that upsets them the most. They saw themselves losing control of world oil prices with all these new tar oil and shale oil and oil from fracking and other oil wells coming in as well in other places. And that's what this is all about.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, you know what? Then plus they can squeeze by doing this. They squeeze off the shale. Wouldn't be surprised if after the shale is squeezed off and they quit producing, somebody doesn't go in and try and get that land that the shale is being produced from. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody didn't do that and then shut down production. It also wouldn't surprise me if they're doing this to shut down the flow of money that ISIS is getting out of the oil fields they've stolen, and also putting the squeeze on Russia and Iran to stop their influence in the region, because they don't agree on everything over there.
One is they say the Saudis do not want Iran to get the A-bomb. That's the threat to them. As I understand it, the Iranians are Shiites and the Saudis are Sunni. I'm assuming from what I've read, the Sunnis believe they should be the leaders. They control the holy peninsula of Saudi Arabia. I mean the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. They control it, and the holy sites. They think they should lead Islam and be whatever caliphate. Where I think the Iranians have different ideas, a lot different, and they want the Shiites to dominate. So like a secondary benefit of this is Iran and their big ally Russia, they can't drill oil this cheaply.
No, it cost them, it cost them what, $80-90 a barrel to get it out of the ground in some cases. So yeah, it's killing them.
I read that the Russians have one of the most inefficient oil production systems in the world, and Iran second. The best oil technology comes from places like Texas, Now America is not likely to send them that technology or send American high-tech oil workers over there. Of course, Iran hasn't had access to the high-tech oil for what 30, 40 years, and it you know it does make a difference. It costs you 80, 90 bucks to pump a barrel of oil out of the ground, and the world price is now what $59. What's that? 30. You're losing $30 a barrel.
Yeah, you're not going to pump oil losing money.
And it does hurt ISIS because they steal the oil, whatever they get, they sell it, but they're not going to get as much as they would have gotten.
Plus, they've got to maintain the refineries, and if they don't have money to repair them, and they're just going to pump them till they quit pumping, and they're going to walk away from them. But it wouldn't. But this is lining. What we're here for tonight is this is kind of lining thing. We could possibly line things up to create a need for the King of the North, Germany, and the union that will be later formed with them, to have a need to come down into the South through into the Middle East over possibly oil.
Here's a possibility. I don't know how all this works, but I'm told in the wintertime, like 80% of the heating in Europe is done by natural gas. It's mostly from Russia and eastern Ukraine, and it comes through pipelines that come out. Well, if the Russian economy is in bad shape, I don't know, is that going to hurt their supplying Europe with the natural gas? By the way, they claim America has more natural gas than any place on the planet. If we had developed our natural gas like we could have and should have, except environmental radicals have been blocking that kind of thing, we could be shipping natural gas and exporting it to Europe, cutting down their dependence on Russia. But we haven't. So if this all sets off things that upsets Europe, this could at least be part of, you gotta mess up the current system before you get the new one.
Yeah.
Let's not write China plumb out of this equation, because China has been making improvements for a long time now. They have that new canal that they've been built that's comparable to the Panama Canal, except about 2 or 3 times as long. It's not complete, but they're working on it. They built new ports all along the sea to the south in that direction, which we're talking about kings of the north and the south in that area, that you mentioned a second ago. How much easier will it be for China to move soldiers and military equipment along those ports that are being built toward the south and through those canals into that part of the country, instead of having to take the long routes around? So, and they have the soldiers to put in where they want to. China has more foot soldiers than anyone in the world. And, just keeping track of that, like I say, we don't need to lose sight of China in this and get lost in Russia and Iran.
Well, one thing is probable. I've read that we have some quotes here that in North Dakota, Texas, oil production and searching for new oil wells has already declined. So the contraction in production of oil is unavoidable. It's happening. 36% decline in drilling permits issued in the last 2 months. So the search for new oil is declining, and it's clear that these low prices will affect the economy of a lot of countries in the world. It'll be a blessing for America, but could it be a financial trap? Like you say, Ken, everyone says, well, we don't have to worry. When oil prices go back up, they'll reopen those oil fields and start pumping again. Yes, but like you say, what if a lot of them are bought up by people who are allied with OPEC, then they won't open them up again. Leave them closed up.
Look who has the money when you're talking of that. You're talking George Soros, number one. He has probably the deepest pocket in the world. he has more than one shell company that he could buy property in that manner. And I don't think there's anything he would like more than to think him to be the king of the world in charge of everything. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, it plays out in some ways, and it's not guaranteed, that, you know, oil could be the modern day Tower of Babel, as I was saying, because it's the one thing that everybody may have to learn to get along and like each other over, or you're going to kill each other over, one or the other. But it's going to be that thing that brings about one world government in one way or another, and then, you know, then moves into one world religion and the other things that go with prophecy. Speculation, of course.
Well,
Well, one thing, go ahead, Ken.
well, I'm just saying, the things that cause war is desperation for energy, desperation for food, starvation. You know, those people get desperate, and when they have no other option, they go to war. I mean, that's been the reason for every war throughout history. Is somebody needs something, somebody else has got it, so they're going to go get it, or else their people are going to die, or they're going to suffer hardship if they don't. So they're forced into a corner and they go to war. In order for the war and prophecy to start out, somebody's going to have to get desperate. And you can see the radical Islam down south, if they have control of oil and prices get pushed up, and Europe needs energy and they can't get it, they're going to come back down. And you know, you can see how these things could play out just based on what we're seeing in the world today. You can see them kind of setting up. Russia's ruble drops off. They can't produce oil. They cut the pipeline off to Europe. Europe's all dependent on the Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And if something causes them to cut the pipeline off, Europe needs energy. Europe can't get it anywhere else except maybe the U.S. if we have enough to supply them, or else they got to go on to the South to either stave off radical Islam or get energy. And you can see how that could play out real easily.
And what if it works the way the Saudis want it to work? I mean, a lot of people think the Saudis are gambling and this gamble won't work. But what if it does? Let's say this goes on for, say, a year and a half or 2 years, and they destroy the tar oil industry in Canada, which, you know, Calgary is booming, or at least was a few weeks ago. Some of their companies are closing down now, and destroys the shell oil industry and other oil wells that are marginal in America, and the fracking oil industry, drives them out of business, to the point where they're not likely to be able to come back. And then the Saudis say, now we have what we want, control of world oil prices. And then, of course, they drive them back up, and we're under their, at least, financial thumb. And there's one more aspect of it. Oil is traded in petrodollars, or at least most of it is, and that's always been a big issue. Obviously, America has been the big financial market, and the dollar's been, you know, the soundest currency in the world. Although a couple years ago, for the first time in American history, I mean, going way back to the 1800s, America lost its good credit rating, and our debt has doubled almost 100% in the last 6 years. So, even though America's been the solid currency in the world, etc., that could change too, and that could be a factor in a changing world. Because the one thing that I always think about, the mark of the beast. The mark, you know, it could be symbolic in several ways. It could also, mark in French and German means dollar. The picture of the beast is on the mark, on the dollar, just like George Washington's on our dollar. And it could be the world's dominant currency. Because if the dollar gets deserted by the oil producers in some kind of internal oil fight, the dollar could fall into collapse 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, and maybe a resurge in Europe organized around maybe a powerful Germany with the mark could replace it. This could be the first step in a series of steps that could change the world's economy.
It could, it could. Well, I think without a doubt the world's economy is changing already. The United States is becoming a lesser of an influence. Um, Europe, I mean, everybody's economy is becoming smaller, except for China. Theirs is the only one that's growing right now, and even theirs is leveling off. So the world is pretty much peaked, and it's leveling off or receding. It's just, I think right now with the United States being its dominant role in the world has waned. It's being reduced to a second world, or even on the playing field with maybe Europe and Russia and China and all them. But with our influence waning, everybody else is vying for top dog, and that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing Russia was trying to play top dog, and they're getting knocked down a peg. Who's really behind that? We don't know. But I do find it curious that they dropped the dollar this year. China and Russia, like you were saying, dropped the dollar as their common exchange for currency, and now they're in trouble.
Now I'm
And
wondering if China's regretting that, don't you?
yeah, well, yeah,
And by the way, there's the positive side of this, maybe positive, and that is maybe the Saudis' gamble will fail. It's like playing chicken. You know, you keep lowering prices, keeping low until somebody's financial house kind of blows up. I think it's like the Saudis are playing chicken. What if maybe a year and a half from now they say, we've lost enough money, this isn't working, and they give it up and start, oil prices rise back, and the U.S. shale oil industry survives, and the U.S., let's say, the Saudis say we can no longer control oil prices. It's out of our hands. The dollar is going to be stronger. The American economy is going to be stronger. If that happens, I'm saying if, I don't really know, of course. Maybe that means God is giving America a little more time to economically finance God's work and to repent. It is a possibility, right? That the Saudis could blink before our oil industry blinks.
I don't know. You know what? I think the Saudis can pump oil all day long and not worry about the price. If you think about it, so it costs them less to get the oil out of the ground. So maybe they're making half as much. But what if they're pumping 60, 70% more? Their bottom line is still the same, but their global influence is more. Their global influence is, as power goes, is up 60%. And that's what they're aiming for. They still get the money.
And by the way, their oil is near the surface, so it's cheaper.
Yep.
And they've had the benefit of high-tech Texas oil technology. I mean, the Saudis have, so they can probably even get. They say American oil companies and Saudi oil companies could get even more efficient at producing oil in the better wells.
Right.
So the question of who blinks, my deep gut tells me I don't have much faith that God is going to bless America in the long run. And we might read Deuteronomy 28. You realize that predicting the future, we know what's going to happen, we just don't know the when. We might have more time, and if the Saudis blink and just give up trying to control the oil prices, and American, shale oil wins out, and those companies stay strong in spite of all this, but I really don't think I don't have much faith that God is going to bless America in the long run. This may be a short-term blessings, low oil prices. Enjoy it while you can. By the way, guess which state has the cheapest oil in America?
Missouri.
The state of Missouri. Missouri. Missouri.
What do you got over there?
Well, we saw $1.83. As a matter of fact, we filled up at $1.83.
Yeah, I've seen some mid 180s. Actually, Ohio's been some of the cheapest gas in the country all year, and it's killing the margins over here.
We've been pretty cheap in Alabama, but I think the cheapest I've seen anywhere is around $1.99.
Yeah, 184 is what we've got here, as low as 184.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yes,
'Cause,
Yeah.
drive, take those, take those Sunday drives, go cruising, do whatever you ain't had a chance to do it. Do it.
Crank up
I
the
don't
four-wheel drive.
forever.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to read Deuteronomy 28, 43 and 44. The stranger that's within you shall get up above you very high, and you shall come down very low. He shall lend to you, and you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. It's basically saying that one of the curses that Israel would get if they didn't obey God was they would be the debtor. Now, while this example I'm giving you it is just one particular city where my younger son lived. The two biggest companies uh, in that city were run by foreigners. I mean, foreign executives from overseas were running it, and it just seems as if more and more America is not the creditor as we had been for, the financial hub of the world for many, many years. We're now becoming debtors. Now, how bad it's gotten, that's hard to say. But if the Saudis are able to run our productive oil industry down sufficiently so that they can set oil prices, you realize this dumping happened to other companies. Like many of the electronic companies, the Japanese would dump, let's say making televisions 30 years ago. They would dump for 5 years cheaper televisions until the U.S. companies would run out of business, and they learned the lesson you just can't compete in that field. And the Chinese have done that for a whole bunch of companies. And that's what the Saudis are trying to do, dump oil, to suppress the domestic market, which in the long run makes us dependent on foreigners. Now, God can reverse all that if he wishes to bless us. So what do you think, Ken? Is God going to bless us in the long run?
I don't think we're asking God to bless us, not this country. I don't think if this country would get on its knees and repent, yeah, but I don't think it's in their heart.
What do you think, Doug?
Well, I think just the last 2 days that we've seen answers that question, Dr. Ricks. This country especially has gone deeper into paganism than I think I've ever seen, uh, and people will take no end to Scripture and twist it and turn it to make it say, what they want and support all the pagan beliefs that they want to incorporate into their lives. And I think God told us very clearly that Christ said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And no other gods before me is his first. And he tells us he's a jealous God. And I just don't see him, I don't see God giving us a reprieve at this stage. I think we had a warning. I think most everybody agrees in 2001, this country, the hedge of protection was removed. And I really feel that was our warning. We've had others before, but when we combine everything this country's doing, we go all the way back to 40, 50 years, murdering our babies before they're even born. Pornography is at its highest rate in this country of anywhere around the world. You can just make a grocery list of things that this country not only do not show any sign or intent of changing, we show no intent of wanting to change. And in fact, where the Scripture says, in the last day, we will be calling what is right, we'll call wrong, and what is wrong, we will call right. So I think that leaves us at the bottom of the barrel.
Right. It's pretty obvious to me that this country's been rejecting God for quite some time, and I think this is where we're at, where we've made our own place. One other thing about the oil and about the Saudis get everybody shutting down drilling. You know, when that stuff gets boarded up, it takes time to refire it. So if it goes long enough, and by the way, if this does last a couple years, like you said, we're speculating, but if let's say it lasts 2 years, we got election in 2 years. Something to think about. Also, like I said, if they have to refire these wells and they've boarded them up and they've been that way for a while because it doesn't pay to pull the oil out of the ground, then it takes time to refire all that equipment. And in the meantime, oil could go $150, $200 a barrel. I mean, they could just say, "Hey, we want this much for it," before we could ramp back up, ramp production back up. And if they've been, this country had a lot of oil wells in the past. When oil got low enough, they just shut them down. About 3 or 4 houses down from where I live, there used to be an oil well. A little, the ones that the alarm, and you could hear it at night. Ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But when oil was dropped, I mean, when it was dirt cheap, $15, $20 for oil or something, they shut it down, capped it up. It's been capped off for years. The people that live there don't even know they have an oil well out back because they've sold it and moved.
And I just thought of something. The finances it might take to restart a series of wells. Let's say if our country has gone down financially, and getting investors to say, well, if we do that, the Saudis might lower the price again and run us out of business again. It's not worth it. Just like producing TVs in America is not worth it because of the Asian undercutting. If that attitude exists, then we would be under the thumb of the Saudis as far as one of the great financial assets of the world, oil. Also, another possibility, say we have in the EPA or other agencies, radical environmentalists are there, and they decide we don't like oil, and we're going to make it very difficult or nearly impossible to restart all wells that are closed. So in effect, we might, just because we have radical beliefs, we're not going to use the wonderful resources God has put under our feet. It's like Natalie says, it's like having your own pantry of food. You close it up and you don't use much of it, but you go to your enemy across town and you go into debt perpetually to buy his food pantry instead of using your own. That's what it's like for us to decrease our own oil production, which we've done, and the Saudis want to crush the new stuff coming up on private lands. That's government lands that are reduced. Put them out of business. So we won't use our own stuff, but we'll go into debt using somebody else's stuff. That's how logical it is. America really should be exporting oil. We have enough oil. If they were to develop all the Alaskan oil fields, offshore oil fields, Texas oil fields, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and a bunch of other places, we could actually be exporting oil like we did, many decades ago.
Right. And for ideological reasons, we're not doing it.
Yeah, we're too progressive in our thinking and wonderful. And you can produce oil safely and not pollute the world. And no other country in the world, if you told them you have this fabulous, financially valuable oil field, would say, well, we don't think we should use it because, and that is a real possibility. We might actually do it to ourselves.
Right.
In worship, paganism, the earth is more valuable than people. I'm not saying don't be a good steward of air, water, and the earth. Of course, we should do that too. But you can do that and still have a robust economy and put the welfare of people first. But that's not what the earth worshipers want to do.
Right. I just saw a speech this morning, a clip from one of John Kerry's latest speeches about how, I'm not really sure exactly where he was going with all of it because he does ramble, but he was talking about how we owe it to our Muslim brothers to teach them how to save the first creation of God, which is the earth. And we need to quit destroying this earth in the way that we're doing. And I don't know if he was talking something about these oil prices, because this was just an excerpt of some of his preaching that whoever found it really incredibly funny that John Kerry would preach to anybody, but but he was talking about how it's not important about the physical and human suffering that's going on because of the Muslim religions around, but that we need to get, in other words, like maybe he's trying to get them off track and get them on to thinking some of this green economy garbage that we're teaching over here. I don't know. Like I say, it was such a ramble.
Well, that's about a waste of breath. They're not going to go for that.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of in short, the key to any successful, thriving economy is cheap, readily available energy. If you don't have that, your economy stalls or fails. And that's why we were successful in this country for so many years, is because we had cheap energy and we could produce with it. You need energy to produce products. You need energy to move products and goods, and without that, you have a struggling economy. And if they end up putting their foot on the energy hose for this planet, and especially for Europe, because Europe's so dependent, we can get by if we have to. But remember, we are in a global economy, so all this oil goes into one big barrel, one big vat that all the world pulls from. So you always got to kind of keep that in mind. We don't just supply us, and they don't. It goes into one big collective pot, and we buy back out of that. So, and if they put their foot on the energy hose for the world, they're going to attract a lot of attention. They may not want. The ire of the people close to them, mostly the European. And if Germany leads a group of nations over there, and their people are starving and they can't do things and move things, and the radical Islam's causing trouble, it doesn't seem a stretch that they would form that they're already working on an army, but form a coalition to come down into the south, into the Middle East and take it. Because if you're not eating, or you're not living life like you think you should, you're gonna do whatever you have to do to supply your people with food and a decent living, or else you're out politically.
One of the things that might help people understand, if you look up the International Energy Agency, that gives us a lot of information. If some of the viewers want to look that up, it gives information on how each country contributes and how it's distributed, and what the plan is in case of a crisis in a certain country. Now, each country is supposed to step up and give a certain amount of fuel in those cases. But I was just looking that up tonight, and I've never studied it a lot. But it's a lot of good information there to keep us posted on how this how it works internationally.
And remember, the goal of OPEC, or at least the leading OPEC countries like Saudi Arabia, is to drive out American shale oil, probably Canadian tar oil, and a few other places, to drive the competition out of business. Then they can set oil prices with impunity, and the world economy will come back someday, parts of it, and then the prices will rise, and we'll be under their thumb. Well, I don't even want to lower the prices. You all haven't done what we wanted lately. We're going to raise it up. I can just see that happening. And like you said, Kim, when they start abusing the world because they have gotten the oil production competition diminished, and then they can set any price they want, you're at their mercy, and that could cause a lot of political things that could prophetically work out.
Right. One quick thing I wanted to add. Going to Russia and reading some of their stuff off Pravda, this gives you an idea of what's going on in the country. I'll just read a few headlines. The big headline over there right now, it says USA harbors plans to decapitate Russia within minutes, and it talks about bombing Russia and taking out their missile silos. I mean, that's on their minds. That's what they're talking about. Here's another article. It says USA exceptionalism is a global threat. Russia to respond to USA moves that poison ties for decades. Russia, well, then they've launched some eco-friendly A5 rocket, and it is on and on about. You can see they're lining, they're getting their people fired up against the USA. That is what's going on in Russia. So Russian people read that, and Russia people want them, Putin, to do something about all these headlines. That's how these things work.
So the dictator tells the propaganda industry, get the people ready to fight.
Yep.
Get them all fired up to fight. So when I do find my cause, they always find us a reason to fight. Whatever it is, something they've done to offend us. The people will definitely back me.
Not only will they back him, they'll demand it. Well,
Yes.
the people want me to do it, I got to do it. That's how these dictators work.
Yeah, the propaganda industry fires them up, and then when they're fired up, you find your usually. By the way, often these dictators create the excuse.
Right. Well, it's the Hegelian dialectic. Create a problem, support opposition to the problem, and then create a solution to the problem, which is what you wanted in the first place. But if you wouldn't have played those two parties at each other, you could have never got the final solution.
And
I know
we
I botched
like
that up, but it's something like that.
we like to think that people are smart enough to see propaganda and realize what it's doing. But you look at all the police shooting propaganda that the media has pushed in America, and it's got mobs and all kinds of bad attitudes out there. Propaganda, or let's say bad media or biased media or media that over obsesses over one story, does affect people. People are more emotional and easy to manipulate than we like to imagine. And I think what you're seeing in Russia is a red flag that if Putin wants to do something, he'll get public support.
Yeah. Yep.
He's preparing the way, and he has control of the press over there.
Oh, yeah.
Reporters
No kidding.
in the past who wrote something that he didn't want written, they disappeared. Would you believe that?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever found them again.
You know what they say about absolute power.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've kept our poor viewers extra long tonight. I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover.
But as I say, watch oil prices, but watch how the U.S. oil industry goes, and if at some point it's suppressed, can it come back up? I hope it can, but I worry that there are forces that might allow the Saudis and OPEC to continue to really abuse us financially and control world oil prices, and we're too enlightened to use our own God-given resources.
Right. So enjoy it while you can.
Well, doesn't it kind of count on how much God's going to allow the Muslims to be the one that administer a certain amount of punishment on the United States as well? I mean, there's several different things they can punish us with, so that's just another one.
Yep. Well.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep. Thank you. I want to thank all of our viewers. I thank you very much for staying with us tonight. We really appreciate that. And we hope everybody can join us next week. We'll let you know what the program's going to be. And again, thanks everyone. And make sure you always seek first the kingdom, and have a great Sabbath.